Welcome. Today we're going to interview Dr. Shiv Pillai, who's a professor of medicine and health sciences and technology at Harvard Medical School. He's a director of the Harvard Immunology PhD and Masters in Medical Sciences programs, and director of the HMS and HST MD Student Research Program. So welcome, Shiv.
Hi, Teeps.
You are a CMC MBBS alumnus, batch of 69. Tell us about your journey from CMC to where you are now.
So I think CMC is where I grew up intellectually, like many of us, I'm sure. And I'd come to Vellore thinking I wanted to do medical research. It was a romantic notion from my youth. And I was interviewed. My group observer was actually Benti Karat, who was interested in leprosy research. And then in men's hostel, and by talking to people like Maman Chandi and Peter Verghese and Vinayak Sen and Ajit Varki and others, I learned a lot of things about leprosy, and I talked more about it to them. And I decided I wanted to do research on the immunology of leprosy. So, I mean, no one knew what that meant really at that time. So Peter actually sent me, he said, you should go and talk to Bachavath. And Bimal Bachavath was then, was one of the great scientists we had around on our campus. He actually discovered the enzymatic basis of a human disease on brains that had come from the US to Vellore. I mean, he was well known, but he wasn't an immunologist, but he encouraged me. He could understand what I was trying to think about and helped me get started and connected me to Jacob John and Rachel Mathai. So I did some research thanks to him, in a sense, and thanks to all the people in CMC who, pushed me and encouraged me, and all the encouragement you get from your peers. And for us, our seniors, they were like professors for us. They gave us part of our education. I think my liberal arts education came from men's hostel, from books that I read from others. So that really got me started. And then I left Vellore, and I finished. I moved to Dr. Bachavath, and he was, moved to Calcutta, and I completed my PhD there with him. I was very nationalistic, and I wanted to do research in India. And I'd seen that Bachavath could do something, so I thought that's what I want to do. And I started my own lab in India, and I remained very, convinced that I wanted to do that stuff. But that was when recombinant DNA, DNA could be cut into pieces and studied and sequenced. All that happened in the mid-70s. And I tried to do some of that on my own, and I just couldn't. And I failed. And I finally had an epiphany, and I realized I was just doing what I could do, not what I wanted to do. And I wanted to answer some basic questions about why you get disease and what happens. And so again, I was a little pig-headed, and I just wrote to two people in the US, and I said, if one of them says yes, I'll go. If not, I just stay on in India. And I was fortunate enough to come out to David Baltimore's lab. I mean, they figured out why immune cells actually make only one receptor. We have two chromosomes from our parents, but you need only one receptor to be specific for an antigen. I mean, you don't want to have two receptors, otherwise you would get autoimmunity. And that's
for those of you who are not familiar, David Baltimore was a Nobel laureate in immunology.
Yeah, he was a Nobel laureate, sort of molecular biology, but he moved molecular immunology as a field. And so that was fun and exciting, and I've been having a blast.
If I may ask, as a non-Christian, what is the impact of the faith basis of CMC?
I think the traditions of CMC, which are traditions of care for the patients, of having practicing medicine without caring for remuneration. I don't think, even though I was not a Christian, I could not conceive after leaving Vellore of actually doing something for a patient and taking money from him. It was just not the way we thought about things in Vellore. So that mindset gets inculcated in everybody, that, you're doing it because that's the right thing to do. And I think that has set itself in Vellore. It is, even if you don't practice Christianity, you absorb that when you're there. And that becomes part of what you do. Now, of course, very fine institutions everywhere in the world have excellence and they want to do things, but they always run on the principle of, you have to be financially solvent, but they maximize it. Whereas in Vellore, that was not the goal. The goal was to reach as many people as possible, to treat them and do the right thing. So I think those values don't go away.
So in a way, excellence itself is a form of sacredness.
It is. I mean, you would think the humanistic thing to do is, and the Hippocratic Oath, if you consider it seriously, we are expected to do the right thing by the patient, not caring about remuneration, and we do it for the better good. I think that's Vellore practices it. Not every place in the world does.
So Shiv, tell us a little bit about what the work that you're doing in relationship to the COVID pandemic.
So during the pandemic, many of us decided that we should keep studying disease in the context of COVID-19. And initially, I wasn't sure that I would immerse myself in COVID-19. I was studying other diseases. But then as the pandemic started, as people I knew well in Italy, a former trainee of mine, told us about what was happening, we decided we need to gear up and use all the tools we have to try to study this disease more. So a lot of people from my lab collected samples from patients. Some people from my lab were in the hospitals treating patients because everyone was drawn in to become an intern. But we stayed open, the lab stayed open while we continued to study COVID-19 very actively. And we decided we wanted to study certain aspects of the immune system. So we studied blood from patients, we studied autopsies, we did rapid autopsies so we could harvest organs rapidly. So in all the strategy, we were trying to study what was going on. And while doing so, we discovered that that COVID-19 induces a state of immune deficiency, so to say, in the person who's got the severe disease. So for a certain period of time, when the disease is still transmissible, the immune system is suppressed in its abilities to keep evolving against the virus. As a result, the virus then starts to mutate, making variants that are better and better at evading us. And so this defect that we have uncovered might help explain why in severe COVID-19, people evolve variants, and these viral variants are ones that are more transmissible and can drive the disease and keep the pandemic going. And I fear this will continue because vaccination, wherever we have vaccinated people well, we are controlling the disease considerably. Variants will not evolve. Wherever vaccination does not take hold, variants will continue to evolve. And then we'll go through multiple cycles of this. And I don't see an end in sight until small molecules appear, which they will in a couple of years. So these are drugs that will inhibit enzymes of the virus. So remdesivir was an attempt at this, but it was not very good. And when that happens, maybe we'll get control.
So if I may ask, we're seeing variants that are more transmissible, but not causing more severe disease. Is that an explanation for that? And is that a cause for concern?
I think the explanation is evolution, right? The virus is being attacked by something that's blocking it from getting into the next cell. Those are our antibodies, but not the tightest antibodies. So then the only way the virus can survive is that when it mutates, those versions of the virus which have something that can evade that antibodies, the antibodies we made, which is now made a new determinant, those are going to survive. And those will only work if they're more transmissible. I mean, the evolution will only work if you can beat whatever is putting pressure on you. The virus is not encountering something that is saying don't replicate so well. Okay, so there's no evolutionary pressure to change its replication behavior, the enzymes that cause its RNA to replicate. but the pressure is on entry into cells, without which it can't survive. So I think it's an evolutionary issue, and this is how it works. It's you're putting pressure on me, I'll change and evade you.
Well, thank you, Shiv. I think I would not be contradicted in saying that you're a shining example of what CMC can produce. And we are proud of who you are and your achievements and the recognition that you've got, not just in the US, but internationally, and the collaboration that you've been able to bring about with CMC. So thank you very much. And I wish you the best.